20th through the 29th. We had 10 talks here, and I took a break, went up north, and we have 6 more, concluding on the 13th. Now the subject of all these talks, of course, is Sri Aurobindo's very well-known epic poem, Savitri. But I always use Savitri as a kind of a framework which allows me to talk about various aspects of Sri Aurobindo's vision, Sri Aurobindo's philosophy and yoga. And one of the things I try to develop is the idea that Sri Aurobindo is not just a religious leader. He, in spite of the fact that he has a flowing beard, he looks very much like an ancient rishi. He is not an ancient rishi, he is a modern rishi. That is, the topics he has taken up and the solutions he has worked out are not meant for any one country or any one subsection of humanity, but for humanity as a whole. And unless those of us who are devoted to Sri Aurobindo know the essential significance of Sri Aurobindo, we are likely to do less than justice to his inspiration. The question always arises, India has always been very rich in the number of saints that we have produced, number of God-men we have produced. And if the purpose of your life is to find God, then I suppose any God-man should work the trick, depending of course on your personality type and what appeals to you, whether you are a bhakta or you are a jnani or you are a karma yogi, whatever. Different people follow different paths. But as I pointed out, as I have been trying to point out, that in Sri Aurobindo's case, finding God doesn't simply mean finding God and losing the world. It is finding God in the world, finding God's perfection in this world, not just for you and me, but for humanity as a whole, for which he believes that a fundamental change has to take place. This change he calls an evolutionary change. It is not a change in social legislation, it's not a change in economic laws, it's not an external change in organizations, it's a change in the human consciousness. Human consciousness as we see it today didn't just begin yesterday or 100 years ago. It has an ancient history, a long history of 15 billion years. This world has been developing, has been manifesting slowly various facets of God for the last 15 billion years. In the beginning, it hardly looked as if God was manifesting here. As you know, after the Big Bang, for billions of years, there was just chaos here. There was no creation. Out of that chaos came creation. And when the creation first appeared, everything was dead, frozen. There was no life here. And gradually, slowly, out of this chaos came creation. From creation came various forms of vegetation. Earth became green with vegetation. Then more and more complex forms of life came until you and I appeared, until human beings have appeared. And human beings represent, as of now, the highest point in the evolution of consciousness. And we have built up a wonderful civilization. We have almost matched God in every respect, except in one, in external power that we enjoy today, the fact that you can call anybody from here, Tokyo or New York or Delhi, whatever, with just 2 seconds, 5 seconds, you may establish a contact, we can fly. As you know, recently they have talked about 2015, the first manned mission to the Mars is being projected. All this we have done. And this is something 300 years ago people couldn't have imagined, that man will acquire so much power. But as we also know, there is another aspect of man's life where the tribal man has not yet completely evolved into a civilized man. This is what has happened. And so, what is the way out? How do we find a match to the external manifestation? How will man change? Everybody wants man to change. And how will man change? And Sri Aurobindo has worked out a program, have worked out an agenda for changing man, and unless man changes, the shape of life, shape of things will not change. That's his conviction. But this is a way of looking at things which may not have a very wide following. I never expect that Sri Aurobindo will have the following which many of the popular Hindu sects in the US had. For one thing, it is not exclusively Hindu. Anybody who has a rational inquiry, who has an inquiring mind, and who is not only thinking of himself but thinking with the age, the collectivity. You can't just think of a perfection now which only limits itself to an individual. Collectivity is important. Similarly, matter is important for the 20th century, 21st century. We cannot just ignore matter. So this emphasis on collectivity, collective perfection, collective manifestation, the emphasis on matter, the emphasis that we do not have to choose between science and spirituality. Until now, we had to choose between science and spirituality. Even Einstein, Newton, and all these people didn't deny God. Through mathematics, whatever mathematics they were doing, they reached this conclusion that there has to be a source of all this manifestation. They called that source God. So these people called God. But even in Einstein's time, or for Newton and so on, I don't think there was a possibility of really reconciling the religious pursuits and the scientific pursuits. They were both valid, that's what they could say. But Sri Aurobindo gives a new perspective through which you can see how they are both not only two complementary perspectives, but both in some sense have interconnection. They are connected enterprises. That's why what is called evolution, which gave such a shock to the believers in the West, particularly the Christians, because Darwin's evolution went against everything that the Bible was saying. Sri Aurobindo makes it a greatest ally of his philosophy by making evolution as yoga of nature. Evolution is nothing else, but the whole nature is in yoga. Yoga, as you know, is manifesting higher and higher levels of consciousness. If that is what yoga is, the nature must be in yoga, because at one time it was dead, it almost looked dead. Then came the vegetation, then came higher and higher forms of life, then came man. And so this itself is in some sense yoga, and therefore in Sri Aurobindo's way of looking at it, as I said very early in my course of lectures, you have no choice. We are all yogis. You have, there is no choice unless you think that you are outside nature. And none of us is outside nature. We are all born as part of nature. As long as you are born part of nature, you are a yogi, except that you may be conscious of it or you may not be conscious of it. And yoga is the ancient discipline by which, as Swami Vivekananda said long time ago, you compress your evolution, your growth of several lives to come in one life. That's what yoga does. And Sri Aurobindo has given a new direction to yoga. And as he said, in the 20th century people believed induction and deduction are the two things to which man owes all his progress. We are very grateful to science and technology. And science and technology depended entirely or primarily on the process of induction and deduction. But 21st century is going to recognize yoga as a still greater contribution to human progress than even deduction and induction. Everywhere, if you want to see the rhythm of human progress, if you want to see whether you're a Jew or a Christian or a Hindu or a Muslim, whatever part of the world you are in, you are a part of the same process. Some person may be a little ahead, some person may be a little behind him, but humanity as a whole cries out for a new leadership, for a new way of life, for a new direction for growth, and this is what Sri Aurobindo has defined. Of course, to call Sri Aurobindo Hindu is to call science Christian, just because science grew developed in the West, and in the West, whether choose or not, most people happen to be Christians. You can't describe science as Christian. Similarly, what Sri Aurobindo has given is Hindu in that sense. He happened to be born in a Hindu family, plus of course you can't deny the fact that we have a long tradition of spiritual quest, and as Sri Aurobindo has always pointed out, spiritual quest is not exclusive to India. Spiritual quest, every nation has a spiritual quest of its own. In India, it's very often take a religious form. In other countries, it's very often it has taken a less religious, more aesthetic, more artistic form. So these are all spiritual quests. In the 20th century and 21st century, young people again are looking for the same verities, the same eternal truths, but they won't accept them in the religious form. You have to present them in a new way, in the way even communism they won't accept. They need a truth even greater than communism. This is what the first part of the 20th century, communism was a great, appealing thing. Every intellectual wanted to show that he was a communist. Now, of course, people have found that communism, in my judgment, came a little too early. Communism is a social and economic setup which can only work if people are much more evolved. So without human evolution, even communism won't work. Of course, Marx has made a great contribution to human development, human thought, but the fundamental thing that has now to happen is man has to grow one step beyond where he is, from the mind to higher levels of consciousness. How to do it, what are the ways of doing it, all this Sri Aurobindo has laid out. And as I have been emphasizing, the 40 years that he spent unknown almost in Pondicherry, everybody misunderstood him. People thought, he was a very brilliant Indian, but lost to the country, lost to the world. And lo and behold, he was doing exactly the opposite. He was entirely concerned, totally concerned with the future of humanity. In what way, how, and all this is the major theme of Savitri, particularly Ashwapati's yoga. And I spent about 6 to 7 talks, as you remember, on Ashwapati's yoga. And then, of course, we proceeded, because Sri Aurobindo has a story to narrate, and that story is the story of Savitri, which comes from the Mahabharata. And we have reached a point now where Savitri is born as a result of Ashwapati's prayer to the Supreme Mother. Remember, Ashwapati says, the Divine Mother says, look, Ashwapati, you have come very high, but humanity has not yet realized what it really needs. It is simply still happy with its limitations. Only when humanity is ready, then all these things will come to it. Ashwapati says, no, Mother, we can't wait for very long. We have been waiting for millenniums. You have to do something to expedite this process, to hasten this process. And in response to this, Savitri is born as an avatar, as the divine's grace come down on earth. Now, please remember, Sri Aurobindo can't take too many liberties with the story. It is a story given to him in the Mahabharata. He has to stick to it, and by and large, he sticks to this story and develops it. Then, of course, the story goes on, as you know. After Savitri is born, her childhood, her growth as a young girl, these are beautifully described. If you remember, there are also beautiful descriptions of nature. And Savitri is now grown up, and Ashwapati realizes, because of Savitri's effulgence, Savitri's inner glory and beauty, no young man dares to come anywhere near her to claim her as his life's companion, life's partner. And so Ashwapati sends her out into the open world to seek for a life's companion. And all that is described beautifully. Savitri goes round Aryavarta. She visits towns and villages and countryside and forests. All this is glorious description. And there she meets Satyavan. And the meeting of Satyavan is described, as we read out last time, the most glorious terms. And here, as you can see, love, as Sri Aurobindo describes it, is the most spiritual of sentiments. love which starts very low. It's like climbing what is called the Jacob's ladder, and the same love which wastes itself as desire, as lust, as greed, the same love, when it sublimates, when it climbs higher and higher, can manifest the way it has manifested between Satyavan and Savitri. All this we have seen. Now we have come to a point when Satyavan and Savitri have met and they have entered into matrimony. This is a recognized form of marriage in ancient India called Gandharva Vivaha. If your daughters don't ask your permission, they are not being very modern, they are only being very ancient, because Savitri first got married and then went to her father to seek permission. And so she goes back to her father and just wants to report to him that she has met this young man, and her father had said, you don't need any other guide, but your heart will guide you to the right man. He says, I have listened to the dictates of my heart guided me to him, and we are now married, and this has been done. As you know, at that time when Savitri reaches the father's court, Narada, in Indian Puranas and so on, Narada is a very important character. He is somebody who commutes between God's highest abode and the earth often. So he is supposed to be there. And when Savitri reports to her father this has happened, of course her father and mother are very happy because this is an auspicious time, occasion when Narada is visiting them. So ask Narada to bless this union between Savitri and Satyavan. Of course he doesn't have any hesitation in praising Satyavan. He says Satyavan is a very rare, exceptionally brilliant, exceptionally mature, exceptionally, kind of perfect human being. But the way he says this, Savitri's mother gets suspicion that all may not be well. Something is, Narada is holding back, and she requests Narada to hold nothing back. Narada says human beings do not benefit from prevision. Prevision, knowing your future, we are all very anxious, when we are young boys. A fellow who pretended to read hands was the most popular among boys. Every girl, every boy wanted him to read his hand. So everybody is interested. Even now, I have a friend, a very elderly man. He's now about 80. He can't properly hear. He can't properly, remember things. But whenever we meet him, everybody wants to show his hand. The same hand, maybe 8 times, 9 times. We have this craze about knowing our own future. And Narada hesitates, but of course secretly he's there to reveal this future so that Savitri's will is made stronger. And he reveals this future and he says Satyavan has just 1 more year to live. Then of course Savitri, as we saw, Savitri's mother tries to dissuade Savitri from going ahead with this project and asks her to go out once again, a second time, to choose her life's partner, and Savitri says no. This is done only once, and even if I have only 1 year to live with Satyavan, that year to me is of greater consequence, greater importance than 1,000 years spent in the company of someone else. And then finally she says, I have seen God smile at me in Satyavan. When I look at Satyavan and smile at me, I feel God is looking at me. I have seen the eternal in a human face. If a girl can say this much with the conviction that Savitri says, of course the mother has to wring her hand helplessly, and that's what Savitri's mother does. But then Savitri's mother turns to Narada and asks Narada, why is it that Savitri has to undergo this suffering? Savitri is a young girl of 18 and 19. This is the typical paradigm example. Why me? Why should this happen to me? Each one of us has at some time or the other in life has asked this question. If you have never been made to ask this question, then I'm not sure that you are very lucky, because you live with the gods you inherited from our fathers. We all believe in our gods, in whatever gods our parents said. So accepting those gods, remaining a Hindu is like ancestor worship. You don't choose to be Hindu, you just continue to be Hindu because you're born in a Hindu family. But then in most people's case, they have to go through these earthquakes, inner earthquakes and volcanic movements, when everything in your life suddenly collapses and the God you trusted, the God you believed in seems to have deserted you. Then you ask this question, is there a God? Why, if there is a God, why is it that I'm made to suffer all this? Why me? There are so many people, they all get scot-free. But what is interesting is, each person thinks the same thing. Each person thinks he has had a very raw deal where everybody else is going happily and merrily in life. I have had this deal. That's what everybody feels. And Savitri's mother puts this case very strongly and says, if there is a perfect God, why is it that this world is so imperfect? Why is it that this world is so full of evil and suffering? Even when you claim this is a world created by God, and God who is in himself a paragon of perfection of every kind. Couldn't he have made a better world? Couldn't he have made a world less full of suffering and imperfection and pain? This is the question Savitri's mother asks, and finally says, like almost all the Western philosophers, maybe what we talk about, what we say when we talk about soul and God, these must be just fictions. This is just an hallucination. When you get up early in the morning without having adequate sleep and sit for meditation, your mind doze off and you begin to see dreams, and you call them dreams, visions. You call there is a soul, there is a God. I don't think there is a God, there is a soul, there is any meaning to this whole damn enterprise. It's just a zero. This seems to be a world without any law, any organization. This is the pitch to which Savitri's mother has been driven because of her personal tragedy, because a mother can't just live with this prospect of her only daughter marrying somebody, and that marriage, the husband is going to live only for 1 year, and then of course a long, long life all alone. Narada has to answer this question and this is basically the question of why is there pain, evil and suffering in this world. Now this is a question on which most philosophies flounder. This is a very, very difficult question to answer, and I'll tell you why this is a difficult question to answer. But before I do that, I will try to say briefly what are the various things people have said. I'm not a philosopher, so I can't present to you all philosophic various positions on this topic, but basically there are 2 or 3 positions. One position, of course, is to say that there is no creator, there is nobody called God. This world is just a series of accidents. So if there is just a series of accidents, why do you think somebody made this? There is no God. This is the explanation. There is evil. They do accept there is evil. It's a part of our existence. But who told you that this world was made by God? This is an assumption which is totally unjustified. There is no God. Like right from the beginning, right from the Big Bang until now, everything has been a series of accidents. And life is only one life. This life ends in the grave or whatever. Dust thou art, to dust returnest. This is all there is to life. So don't look for eternities, don't look for anything else. Now, this is easier said than done. A man who really believed in this finiteness of life, external and internal, was a man like Bertrand Russell. But if you read his thoughts on this topic, you will see that he is greatly disturbed by the fact that life ends in the grave. There is no meaning to life beyond the grave, because his commitment, his metaphysical commitment is to atheism and to saying that there is no life after this. There is no significance to life after we have died. And he says, what happens to all human heroism, all human idealism, all human dreams, if everything is going to end the day we die, how sad it is, but life becomes meaningful if you say this is a journey of the soul in one life, And what you do in one life matters, because this journey continues in the second life, in the third life, in the fourth life, until finally you find your oneness with the divine. This is an ongoing journey. So every moment that you live, everything that you do is significant. It's not an insignificant. This is the cry. The problem with materialism is it reduces life to insignificance, and not many people can live with this thought. Of course, not many people even ask whether there is any significance to life. We all live like animals. Dog never asks, why do I live? It just lives. At a certain time when it's hungry, it eats, and it's tired, it sleeps. When it's the season, it mates, and it dies. Most people are like that. But there are some people who ask the question, is there any significance to life? And if you say there is no significance to life, except that, you go on and you die on a particular day, that's the end of it, there is no significance, then you say, what is it? Am I just then a small worm crawling on a speck of dust in this vast universe? Is that all my life is? And of course, scientists are telling you that's exactly what your life is. But the strangest of strange things is something within you doesn't accept this. It can't be true. There must be some significance to life. All the cry, anguish of Western literature in the 20th century is about this problem. The existentialist literature, at the heart of this is the quest for significance to life. Science, psychology, sociology, everything says life has no significance. A human being is trapped. He is materially trapped. He is spiritually trapped. He is psychologically trapped. He has no will of his own. That's what they say. And this is logically very comfortable to maintain this. But somehow, something within us say, no, there must be something to life beyond this. That's what these people are saying. So the one kind of answer to this question, why did God create this world, is there is no God, just this world is a series of accidents. But as I said, the problem with this is it reduces life to a zero sense, any significance. There is another answer people have given, and that answer is they just deny the existence of evil. They say the existence of evil exists because you look at the world through the eyes of ignorance. The reality simply is Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. The supreme reality is the only real. The pragmatic reality, the reality that you experience here, is a lower kind of reality. It is not the ultimate reality, it is an illusion. So they just don't believe that there is any question to answer, because the real thing, in the real reality, there is no evil. What about the evil that you say, oh, that evil, that exists only at the pragmatic level, and that doesn't have an eternal significance. Once this again, as you know, it doesn't satisfy many people. Like there is a story of a guru who was saying, look, God is in everybody and everything. You must see God in everything. You must see God in a donkey, in a tree. Everything is a manifestation of God. And that was the lesson that they had learned by heart that day. So all these disciples went for a bath. After the first lesson, they went for a bath to the river and had their bath and were coming back. As they were coming back, an elephant which had gone wild was coming charging at everybody. And everybody is saying, the wild elephant has gone mad, please make way, give way to the elephant, don't stand in the way. He said, my guru has said everything is God, so this elephant also must be God. So he didn't budge at all, he just stood there, and the elephant got so enraged, he took him in its trunk and just threw him, and he had only a few bones broken. Finally he was taken to his guru and complained to the guru, see, I just was following your lesson. You said everything is God, and so I thought the elephant also must be God. They said the Mahot was saying, wild elephant, please take care. Was he not a God also? Why didn't you listen to that God? So this is like this. So we have to make sure that not only the Brahman, the reality exists, but this is also a reality. The droughts, the exploitation, the pain, the suffering, the evil, the deaths that we all feel, you simply can't deny their existence. Now, among the various philosophers of this kind, Sri Aurobindo is probably among the very few who does recognize the existence of evil in this reality, in this world, but except that he thinks this problem can be remedied. This is only a temporary phase. You will ask, temporary how long? If you will be quite surprised to know that evil only started with the human mind. Until the human mind came along, there was no notion of evil. Even pain came along with life. Before life came along, there was no pain. Before mind came along, there is no evil. Because you don't say in the animal world what a wicked tiger it is, that it feeds, it has its, a lamb for its lunch and a rabbit for its dinner. What an evil, violent animal. We don't say that. In that world, there is no notion of good and bad. There is no notion of moral and immoral. All this comes with the mind. And so Sri Aurobindo says that during this stage of our growth, this experience is necessary, and that can be, one day we can go beyond the need for pain, evil and suffering. Now for some reason, this seems to be an a kind of circumstance accompanying our growth through this zone. This is a reply that he develops at great length, philosophically, metaphysically, in the Life Divine. But here, Narada doesn't try to give a metaphysical reply. He treats it more as a poetic kind of treatment to this problem. But before that, I would like to say a few things and then come to what Narada says very briefly. This question of evil, presence of evil, many philosophers have used this very cleverly and said, if there is a God, and if that God is all kind, all wise, and all powerful, how does he allow evil to flourish in this world? Then some philosophers have pointed out, this is possible because God is either kind and compassionate, but he is weak. He knows that we are all suffering. He would like to do something about us, but he is powerless. There is nothing he can do about it. Or you will have to say, God is all powerful but doesn't care. So he says, you cannot describe God as all powerful and all compassionate and still account for this suffering and pain in this world. That is the play philosophers have made with this kind of thing. But in philosophy, there are various attempts in Indian philosophy there is what is called the dualism. There is the good and the bad, and there is a constant struggle between the good and the bad, good and the evil, and it is not certain which one will ultimately triumph. Much depends on what side you and I support. If we support the good, good might win. If we support evil, evil might win in the long term. This has been, the duality begins with Plato. Plato says, being came out of non-being. And it is in the process of manifestation, ideas when they begin to manifest here, because of the imperfection of the medium, the manifestation is never perfect and always remains imperfect. And that is the reason why there is evil and pain in this world. From that time to Sankhya, Sankhya also talks about the Purusha and Prakriti. The Purusha is lost because the Purusha is in complete identity with the Prakriti. So there is this eternal duality between Purusha and Prakriti. If the Purusha withdraws from Prakriti, then he suddenly realizes that he is all free. But the problem with that is then the Prakriti is lost. Prakriti is this creation. So what is the point in drawing yourself from the world and reaching a stage of equilibrium? But in that stage of equilibrium, there is no Prakriti. Prakriti is out of your reach, out of your control. So that is the kind of the result that any kind of duality leads to you. Then of course there is the good God and the bad God. There is eternal struggle. There is the Satan. All these various kinds of things. But as you see, the Hindu God has a very, very difficult job to do, because we do realize there is only one supreme reality which whom recognize as God. Now if there is only one supreme reality, and if in the world created by that supreme reality, if there is evil, suffering and pain, he must be responsible for it. And he must come and explain to us why he created this pain, evil, and suffering. Now, I won't go into the history because our job is not philosophy or metaphysics. I just want to give you a flavor of what Narada says. The first thing, of course, is to realize, there is a lot of moral resentment among people. How does God create this world? And He Himself is exempt from it. Our idea of God is a kind of absentee landlords. You live somewhere in Bombay, and your fields are somewhere in Gujarat. Where there is drought or summer or floods, you don't care. You go at this time every year and collect your whatever has to come and go away. You are a kind of absentee landlord. So we have this notion God is exempt from all this pain and suffering because He sits somewhere else in the seventh heaven, and He makes us suffer all these consequences. Now this is a very difficult proposition. God becomes also morally guilty here. If you and I can not justify this position that God is in, but as I maintain that the Hindu way of looking at God and creation is slightly different from the other way the other religions, particularly the Semitic religions, look at these issues. We do not think God creates a world as a potter creates a pot. When a potter creates a pot, the pot is outside the potter, and the material that goes to make a pot also doesn't come from the potter, it comes from somewhere else, and so the pot is made and the pot is destroyed. The potter feels the pinch except to the extent that his labor is wasted. That's about all. But in our idea, the Hindu idea, of course, people like Shankaracharya and so on will not even entertain this question of God created the world. See, there is no world. This world itself is your illusion. But that apart, most theistic philosophies would entertain this idea of a creator creating a world. But when you take out a creator creating the world, they say the creator became the world. So it's not the creator is outside the creation, the creator becomes this world. God became this world. So, in one sense, if you take that very seriously, this world is the becoming of God. That's what it really comes to. Now, if this world is the becoming of God, why does God choose to grow up in all this evil and pain and suffering? Well, there are a number of things we should first of all clarify. There is a tendency for us to say the world is full of pain, the world is full of suffering, the world is full of evil, etc., etc. Is it really the case that there is so much suffering and pain in this world? If there is so much suffering and pain and the world is all so bad, why is it that an old man of 95, 96, who has been vegetating for a few years, still would like to cling on to his life and still makes inquiries whether the new injection has been developed in America, which will prolong his life by another 3 months, 6 months, whatever, 8 months, If life is all that bad, of course some people do want to commit suicide, but they're because they are mentally sick. If they are not mentally sick, any mentally sane person would not like to lose his life. There is this instinct for life is so precious to us, so basic to us, but the life is all so bad. Why is it that we would like to live longer? There is a folk tale. The Punjabis have this folk tale. It seems there is a woodcutter, who makes his living. Every morning he has to go into the forest, chop some faggot wood, tie it up, make a bundle, carry it on his head, bring it to the market, sell it, and whatever he gets, takes the money to the market, buys his dal, rice, etc. Day after day, this has been his life, and is totally fed up with this life. One summer, it's 11:30, he has not been able to collect enough wood for that day's marketing, and he's grumbling, I don't know why the God of death has forgotten me. The God of death has forgotten me. Why doesn't he remember and take me away? That's the meaning. When as soon as finished saying this, he hears footsteps just by his side, and then somebody comes back and says, did you call me? I am the God of death. No, I didn't mean you. I was just singing a snatch of a song. My wife is very fond of this song. I was just murmuring it to myself. I didn't mean you. You see, the problem is, there is no doubt there is pain in life. But aren't we exaggerating its existence? Take, for example, you are absolutely healthy, good health, the food you eat gets digested, your blood gets purified every second, whatever, all your vital functions are okay. But just imagine toothache. What causes toothache? Maybe a small little cavity somewhere. Compare the entire robustness of your body, that cavity is a very, very small thing. But it can ruin your sleep, it can ruin your nights. Why does that happen? That happens because pain is abnormal. Pain is not normal. And pain, being abnormal, it attracts your attention. In fact, some modern doctors say one of the most wonderful things about man or life is that there is pain. Just imagine something in your system goes wrong and you get no indication through pain. It continues to get from bad to worse, 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 and so on, and by the time anybody gets to know about it, you have already reached the ultimate final stage. But now what happens is, the minute something goes wrong, pain, it calls your attention. Look, there is something here that needs to be looked into. So there are some people who have a disease. The body begins to waste away. At night when they sleep, even if a rat came and nibbled at their fingers and chewed a part of their fingers, they don't even feel the pain. This is a kind of leprosy. And such people pray for pain. Oh God, give pain to my body. Because pain is this device of nature which calls attention to anything that goes wrong. And that is why all great creation is always accompanied by pain. Just imagine the baby being born without mother feeling any pain. In America, young women went through that phase some years, that we want painless birth. Now, you ask a young American girl, they say, no, we don't want painless birth. We want birth with pain, because pain is a part of the experience of giving birth to something new. So the point I am trying to make is not that anybody should court pain or woo pain or go and ask for pain and so on, but we are now talking about the philosophical point that there is pain, and we all complain that this pain is too much, there is too much pain. I don't think there is, the reason we feel there is pain is, there is so much pain is that it is abnormal. And even if there is, as I said, man is healthy, but he has some gum, starts with a throb of pain and it makes you miserable, that is because it is unnatural. And pain has its own reasons, its own purposes. Physically, pain is necessary. Without pain, we will never know whether our body is functioning normally or not. So the first thing, of course, is God is not guilty, in the sense, if there is pain, it is God who is undergoing this pain. And if there is pain, this pain is not as if, it's all bad. It is, it's not a happy experience to undergo pain, but pain has a function in life. And so if we take out this exaggerated, sentimental, moralistic attitude toward pain, the question still remains, why did God choose to grow through pain? Is it not possible for a human being, human soul, to grow from one peak of happiness to another peak of happiness? Why is this pain necessary? In Savitri earlier on, in Canto 2nd, Sri Aurobindo talks about the harsh economy of nature. Now the economy of nature that we are all following is very harsh. Why is it harsh? Because it looks as if in our present condition of ignorance, or whatever you call it, without pain, man doesn't seem to recognize the fundamental thing for which he exists, which is the growth of consciousness. We all tend to be, caught up. We all have our own definition of happiness. What is happiness? Each one of us has a definition of happiness. As I last time, about the fifth or sixth talk, remember I was reading out that passage, an outstretched hand is felt upon our lives from Savitri. At that time I said that we all feel, uh, you know, consider, I give the example of a little child growing up in an Indian home where for him life is nothing but going around in a tricycle and uncle and aunts, and an Indian child has the whole street full of uncles and aunts. Everybody comes and fusses over him, gives him love, hugs him, takes him everywhere. So he is the center of attention, and he thinks life is great. You know. Then comes a day, if you remember, when the mother sends the child to school, and in that school, this child, who found all the time people around him, who adored him, who lionized him, for whom he was the apple of their eye, suddenly being sent to school, where there are other 40, 45 children, as he is one of them, and the first day at school, there is nothing but not elaborating on this. The child feels convinced that the mother doesn't know anything about my school. If she knew, she would not have sent me here. And so that night, that evening, when he goes back home from school, he's determined never, never come back to this place again. And the mother, I'm sure, will support me. He goes and tells his mother all about the bad things that happen in the school. The mother gives a sympathetic ear and says, yes, is that so? I say this, that, and the other. She says nothing. Next morning again, the mother asks the child to get up, get ready. He wears a uniform, the bag and everything. And now he realizes, again I'm being sent to that same hell called school. And then he starts crying. And the mother, who was all these days the mother of compassion, love, mercy, you call whatever, suddenly becomes Kali, Mahakali, Mahadurga. She stands at the gate and asks the child get on to the auto rickshaw or school bus or whatever, go to school. Now on that day, the child's old world has completely been destroyed. Now this world has to be destroyed before you can grow up into another world. Whether we like it or not, this seems to be a function. Pain is pain in our life. This is the harsh economy of life. Unless something shakes us completely, we are all busy making a living, buying happiness, collecting happiness. We have a shopping bag, we have a shopping list, we have various plans. I'll first buy things here and I'll buy things there, I'll then go to New York, I'll buy things there, I will do this, I will build a house in here, I will do this, all this kind of thing. And suddenly something happens and the whole thing is destroyed, and we begin to weep and cry like that old babe, that child who refuses to go to school. Then we realize 20 years later, 30 years later, that because on that occasion my whole world was destroyed, I changed, I started looking for something else. And it is this kind of growth. You see, life is not, it doesn't look like making you and me happy. In the way you and I understand happiness, define happiness, is God's main purpose in creating this world. We would like the world to be such that God, first of all, before He continues with the affairs of the world, asks us, Mr. So-and-so, what do you want in life? Give me your shopping list. This is what we want. When we say, Oh Lord, our sincerest prayer is, Oh Lord, I have a little shopping list. take it, make your will mine. Let my will be done. That's what we say. Let my will be done. It's only very late in life when we realize that this pursuit of your will, this pursuit of the finite things, however huge they may look, will inevitably drive you to the conclusion to which all great people have been driven, which is this world is anityam, asukham. This world is fragile, and the happiness this world gives to you is also very finite, very short-lived. And so, something within us always seeks for the infinite. We don't know it. We go through various phases in life. In this life we seem to seek X. We get X, but then we find it has not given us the satisfaction we expected it. Maybe in next life you seek Y, the same. So X, Y, Z, all these are exhausted, and you just ask, what is it? What went wrong? What went wrong is the inner being that is here in each one of us. Himself is a spark of the infinite. And he will be satisfied with nothing short of the infinite outside. And we want the inner infinite in us to be satisfied with the finite. And that can never happen. It is not because you and I are stupid. It is not because you and I are ignorant. That is the very nature of being human. The nature of being human is there is something within you which cries out for the infinite. And if we don't feed the infinite, then life will always remain, as I said, anityam, asukham. As the Upanishads keep saying, nalpe sukham asti. In the finite, there is no happiness. The happiness is only in the finite, in infinite. But how do we ever get to this point? We get to this point when God somehow spoils our game. The relationship is spoiled, the world collapses. In fact, it seems to be a patent fact. The more you remember God, the more miserable He seems to make you. You see around you, there are people for whom God doesn't matter, but they flourish in life. And those for whom God matters and are turned to God, God suddenly begins to take them very seriously. See, we want God to take us with some seriousness, with all the seriousness. He say, God, what is it? You are giving me a double promotion. We don't want this. This is what happens. This is the pang of growth. And until we reach that point, to which, as I said the other day, somebody like Vivekananda had reached very early in life. When Vivekananda was wandering the streets of Calcutta looking for a job before he became Swami Vivekananda, when still was Narendra Dutt, and his father had died, there was nobody at home to look after his family. He went out looking for a job, and God doesn't seem to take care of His own prophets. He doesn't seem to have any particular care of His own prophets. Any Tom, Dick and Harry goes to Calcutta and Bombay can get a job, but Vivekananda couldn't get a job, just imagine. He was so brilliant in every way, the man who subsequently shook all the delegates in the World Parliament of Religions in New York was not able to get a job in Calcutta. So, when Ramakrishna Paramahamsa learnt about it, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa once told him, look, this is the Kali temple where I have offered worship all these years. You go into the temple tonight at 9 o'clock, stand before the sanctum sanctorum, before the image of the Supreme Mother, and ask her whatever she wants. I promise she will give it to you. He goes into the temple, the main gate is closed, he is just standing in front of these. Tears begin to flow from his eyes, and what does he ask? He asks, oh Mother, give me discrimination, give me vairagyam, give me viveka, give me bhakti. He comes back, and so Ramakrishna Paramahamsa asks him, what did you ask for? Should ask at least for a senior clerk's post, some post which... No, he says, I asked for discrimination, I asked for vairagyam. He says, you fool, you go back again, ask once again, at least some decent job which will give you 150 rupees, 200 rupees salary. Again goes, forgets all these things. Because people like Vivekananda have already reached that stage. We are moving towards it. And in this, there are bound to be situations, there are bound to be, these failures, and suddenly we find, it's a very strange world. We very often feel that, oh, for me there is no, I have got so many relatives, I have got so many uncles, I have got such a bank balance, I have got this, that, and the other. When someday suddenly you find yourself in a situation when all the people whom you can reach, they are either not there or they have gone to America, they have gone somewhere, nothing happens. Ultimately you have to fall on your knees and pray to the Lord, please save me. This is the Gajendra Moksha. In the Bhagavad there is the story of Gajendra Moksha. The elephant feels that it's the strongest animal, but one day when it goes for a bath, the crocodile gets hold of its leg, and it has nothing, he just has to pray. So we all reach that kind of stage. This seems to be, in this stage of ignorance, inevitable. Our old world is constantly being destroyed, because God seems to say to us, look, you are not people, you are not beggars for happiness in this world. You are princes of immortality. Your nature is immortality. Why do you just go begging for happiness? I want some happiness. Please give me some happiness. How do I get some happiness? And money and all these things that we crave for seem to be symbols for us of happiness. These people say your nature is happiness. Why don't you realize that? Your very nature is happiness. Your very nature is immortality. And it is towards this destination, the crown of conscious immortality. If you remember the passage we read out the other day, there is an outstretched hand behind your life, it says, and it holds in its hand a destiny for you, which nothing in the world can change, no will can change, no doom can change it. What is that destiny? The crown of conscious immortality. You will realize that you are immortal. You are the very nature of bliss. It is towards this that we are being driven. This is the ultimate result of all spiritual seeking, and it's only a question of how far and where you are. Now, if you say this, then still you are not, in fact, this you are giving an answer which is kind of, I would give this answer some 30-35% marks out of 100. That God created this big world so that this becomes a kind of a gymnasium for training your inner being to turn to God. If this is the purpose of evil, then what happens when evil goes away? How will people turn to God? God will have to find some other means of torture, you see. Now, this is one way of looking at it. Ultimately, if you really see, there are other things that are discussed here. There is also the occult world, and in the occult world there are all kinds of forces which help the divine, which oppose the divine, which, the forces whose manifestation has created havoc in this world. The Second World War, if you remember, a madman called Hitler brainwashed the most educated people in the world, the Germans, and made them commit atrocities the world had never heard before. And the very nature of this, Sri Aurobindo was very acutely conscious of this fact. When the world recognized this, Sri Aurobindo recognized that this is not just a human being. He is possessed by some asuric anti-divine forces. And Congress was quite surprised. He said, Germans are the enemy of the British, and the British are our enemies, and therefore the enemy of the enemy must be your friend. So people said, go and make friendship with the Germans. Sri Aurobindo said, my disciples must join the war effort. Forget about Churchill. Churchill may not be very sympathetic to India's independence and its demand for independence, but he is a smaller evil. The greater evil is Hitler. And Hitler's aim is to put back the clock of civilization by at least 500 to 1,000 years. Hitler himself doesn't know what kinds of forces are manipulating him, but he is the front of these anti-divine forces that are massed in strength, and these must be crushed. So there are these forces also that come in, there is an evolutionary struggle there, And there is one of the things that happen to man's life very often is forces from the higher levels come and operate on our lives. These are all things, of course, it doesn't mean that we should be very, very, preoccupied with these things. These things are there, but God is capable of taking. Uh, he knows what exactly to be done at what time. As you know, Hitler didn't flourish for very long. He had some glorious years, but ultimately Hitler was defeated, and the march of civilization continues, whatever the price we had to pay at that time. But at the philosophical level, this is also a consideration that there are from occult levels various kinds of forces that come here and play their part in the human affairs. Ultimately, philosophically, pain, the Upanishads describe that God created this world out of bliss, out of joy. Which means, if you and I are to respond to God's purpose in this creation, everything that we do, every touch of the world should bring us waves and waves of happiness, but that is not happening. Why is it not happening? How ego comes in, how ego limits it, how instead of giving a spontaneous reaction of joy and joy and happiness, we seem to be giving a triple reaction of happiness, of unhappiness, and there is a neutral, neither happiness nor unhappiness. This is because limitations of our growth, and how when we grow beyond the mental level, we probably will reach a stage where evil and pain may not even be necessary. Mind seems to be a stage where all these things have come crowding. As the Greek philosopher said, man doesn't have the innocence of animals. He doesn't have the perfection of the gods, because he is hanging in between gods and the beasts, and therefore man is the most tragic of all beings. Now, as long as you live on the mental world, I do not think there is a permanent cure to the problem of evil and suffering. And one of the things that Sri Aurobindo therefore says is, when we reach a higher level of consciousness, from the mind to the supermind, then this harsh economy of nature we might be able to transcend. And early in Savitri, Sri Aurobindo describes, one of the purposes of Savitri's birth was to transcend this harsh economy of nature. As long as you live in the mental world, no matter what you are, who you are, you cannot escape the law of pain, evil and suffering. So this goes on to, he develops this further and further. But as I said, my purpose was not to give you a complete metaphysical solution to this problem, but some of the background, some of the complexities attending this particular issue. But as poetry, this is treated very beautifully, and some of the lines which I think you will remember forever and ever occur in this particular canto, Canto 2. He says on page 442, O Queen, in response to Savitri's mother's questions, Narada is now giving this reply, thy thought is a light of the ignorance. All that brilliant argumentation you said, that perhaps the soul we feel is only a dream, eternal self, a fiction sensed in a trance. That is the conclusion of Savitri's mother. And she says, O Queen, thy thought is a light of the ignorance. Its brilliant curtain hides from thee God's face. It illumes a world born from the inconscient, but hides the immortal's meaning in the world. Then he says later on, these are the lines, very beautiful lines, pain is the hammer of the gods, to break a dead resistance in the mortal's heart. Pain, he says, is the hammer that gods use, just like a sculptor takes a hammer and takes a block of wood and chisels at it all the unnecessary, unwanted stone is removed, layers and layers are removed, and ultimately out of that block of granite or stone, what he creates is a beautiful statue. So there is a beautiful statue in us, and God uses pain to chisel away all these things which are not needed but which we think are a part of ourselves. And ultimately when God has finished chiseling away, what will emerge out of us is the perfect God who is hidden in our being. So he says, pain is the hammer of the gods to break a dead resistance in the mortal's heart, his slow inertia as of living stone. We have parts in us which are inert like that of a living stone. And then he says very clearly, if the heart were not forced to want and weep, if the heart were not forced to want and weep, his soul would have lain down content at ease. If there were no pain, if there were no great discontent bothering man, man would not have even evolved up to the point where he is now, and will never evolve beyond where he has gone, where he has reached. If the heart were not forced to want and weep, his soul would have lain down content at ease and never thought to exceed the human start. There are many people who say, human being is good enough, human excellence is good enough. Why does Sri Aurobindo want us to rise above humanity? Don't you know what a great, wonderful thing a human being is? Yes, but only for a short while. You can't forever live in the human form and never thought to exceed the human start and never learn to climb towards the sun. We're supposed to climb towards the sun. We would not have climbed if there were not discontent and pain in our heart. In the Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo says, this discontent is what distinguishes man from the animals. Animals are happy to choose a bone and, sleep at the roadside and mate during the season, and they don't worry about things. But give man anything and everything that he wants, still he will be discontent. Why is he discontented? What does he want? Well, as I said, he wants the infinite. Unless he recognizes this and pursues the infinite, there is no happiness in life. How do we know this? Pain, therefore, is this constant reminder of the fulfillment that is intended for you, but the fulfillment you are not pursuing. That's what he's saying. If the heart were not forced to want and weep, his soul would have lain down content at ease and never thought to exceed the human start and never learned to climb towards the sun. This earth is full of labor, packed with pain, throes of an endless birth coerce her still. The centuries end, the ages vainly pass, and yet the Godhead in her is not born. And then a few lines later he says, pain is the hand of nature sculpturing men. Pain is the hand of nature sculpturing men to greatness. Pain is the hand of nature sculpturing men to greatness. An inspired labor chisels with heavenly cruelty an unwilling mold. An inspired labor. This God's labor is an inspired labor. He knows exactly what will hurt you and gives you exactly what is necessary. As they say in literature, if Hamlet had lived in Othello's place, and if Othello had lived in Hamlet's place, neither would have been tragedies. Hamlet is given exactly the kind of problem that will disintegrate him. Othello is given exactly the problem that would disintegrate him. In fact, in many ways, they are opposites in temperament. And therefore, exactly where it hurts each, the pain comes. And therefore he says, an inspired labor chisels with heavenly cruelty and unwilling mold. Then he says a beautiful passage, don't think pain is just your share in life. If God comes down to earth and wants to do something for man, God too has to bear his share of pain. Because this pain is the nature of this belt of existence. He who would save himself, same page 444 at the end of it, he who would save himself lives bare and calm. He who would save the race must share its pain. This he shall know who obeys that grandiose urge. The great who came to save this suffering world and rescue out of time's shadow and the law must pass beneath the yoke of grief and pain. They are caught by the wheel that they had hoped to break. On their shoulders they must bear man's load of fate. Heaven's riches they bring, avatar after avatar. All these great people have come down to earth, and they have come down in every country, in every religion. Heaven's riches they bring. How do they bring the heaven's riches? They have to give something back. What is it they give? Their sufferings count the price, or they pay the gift of knowledge with their lives. The Son of God who came down here, Christ, the Son of God, born as the Son of Man, has drunk the bitter cup, owned Godhead's debt, the debt the eternal owes to the fallen kind. His will has bound to death and struggling life that yearns in vain for rest and endless peace. Now is the debt paid, wiped off the original score, the eternal suffers in a human form. He has signed salvation's testament with his blood. He has opened the doors of his undying peace. The deity compensates the creature's claim. The Creator bears the law of pain and death. A retribution smites the incarnate God. When God comes down incarnate, we think when God comes down, he must continue his saga of miracles. The miracle of miracles that the God's incarnation here performs is that he lives exactly like you and me, with all our limitations, and yet becomes an example of how to rise to a higher level of consciousness, as Christ did when he was crucified, when he was bleeding all over, through his legs, through his arms, through his palms. That must be excruciating pain. And the prayer that came out of his mouth, forgiving the whole of humanity, the message of love, that only God can do. Human beings can't do it. It is this example of love. See, Sri Aurobindo says somewhere that Christ, he says, is the person who civilized the West. Even democracy, he says, in the West, in its essentially is Christ's gift to the West. Say this, Christ's spirit made all these things possible. So it is the avatar who comes, and he comes down like a human being, suffers like a human being, but through his suffering he rises. So what about you and me? If God, when comes down, has to suffer. In India, our Puranic gods, we have made so much legend around them that we get the feeling God knows no pain. He is a kind of Krishna. And all that he has to do is pick up his gopis and no. If you really look at Krishna and you look at his life, you will find Krishna was one of the most despised kings of his time. You only look at the Pandavas and say how they adored him. There are many, many people who despised him. They thought this was a crook. Krishna, they said, was a crook. And Krishna, he Ranachodra, remember? He had to run away from the battlefield, seek existence here, there. All this. And later on, toward the end of his life, Krishna's own children despise him. What kind of a man is he? He claims to teach morality. He has so many wives in his zenana. What kind of a person is he? He talks about dharma and how many people he has duped, In the Mahabharata war, he was the first man to do all these things and taught Pandavas lessons in immorality. So there was Krishna haters in Krishna's time, but we only remember these things. Finally, as I said the other day, Mahabharata war is finished. He goes to Gandhari to seek her blessings. Gandhari is so enraged. He says, you are responsible for the massacre of my 100 sons. I was the mother of 100 sons and all are killed except one. What is it you have done to me? And she says, I curse that your entire Yadava tribe gets destroyed. Krishna says to Gandhari, thank you very much because I have come here. I was thinking of a way of going back. You have provided. I know now how to go back. God, in Indian Puranas only the good things are all talked about. We all think that Krishna's life was just, a merrymaking, in the Vrindavan, he had a good time, everywhere he had a good time and also a bad time that we don't remember. And Abhimanyu, for example. Abhimanyu only learned how to enter the Chakravyuh. He didn't learn how to come out. And the story says, when Abhimanyu's mother had Abhimanyu in her womb, one day they were, Krishna and this lady were traveling together, and he started Subhadra, right? All this technique of getting into this vyuha, this formation, army formation, how to go into it. Subhadra was fast asleep, but somebody in her womb was saying, listening to the whole thing and saying, and he realized it was Abhimanyu. And he only taught him how to go in, he didn't teach him how to come out. Why? Because he knew Abhimanyu had to die there. And he has no special compassion for his sister's son. His own children, they made fun, as I told you last time. Durvasa and company were coming to Dwarka to consult Krishna. They all gangsters. Dwarka had these gangsters, and the leaders of the gangsters were Krishna's sons. And they said, this Durvasa is coming, let's make fun of him. So they dressed one of Krishna's son as a woman and took that son to Durvasa and said, Maharshi, you are a great man, you can look into future. Will you tell us whether this lady will deliver a boy or a girl? Making fun of him. He got so enraged, he said he will deliver a pestle, iron pestle. And they say this iron pestle was ultimately responsible for the extermination of the entire Yadava brood. Yadavas were given to drinking, alcoholism. Krishna saw all these things, did nothing about it. This is the avatar. If you look at the other side of the avatar had all these shortcomings, avatar had all these, but we only see, Kaliya, how he struggled with the Kaliya, how he raised the mountain on one finger and so on. But he also had these things. Ultimately, how did Krishna die? They say some hunter was going by and saw something that looked like a deer and aimed an arrow and it went into Krishna's feet. Of course, somebody could have rushed him to a Vaidyaraj and he could have been treated and saved. Nothing happened. Krishna died. So, avatar doesn't come. One of the things I want to emphasize is, although we always have wonderful stories about avatar, what about Rama? You didn't say Rama had a happy life? The greatest warrior had to give up his kingdom, had to go in the forest. Going in the forest is not like going to Lake District now. It was a terrible, terrible kind of existence in those days. He and his young wife and young brother had to go there, live for so long. And just imagine the ignominy of just his wife being kidnapped. And he going round and round the trees, crying and weeping, oh, tell me, where is my wife? Just imagine all the suffering that Rama had to undergo. And finally he killed this chap, Ravan, and came back. And then after a few years, he had again to abandon his wife. His wife was pregnant. Because somebody said something about, there is a story about a washerman. He, and he found his wife had gone to her father's place without permission, his permission. Indian husbands have always been like this. Even in Ram Raj they have been like this. I don't know when they will ever change. He said, "What is it? You've been away for 2 days without asking my permission. You mean to say that I'm like Rama? He doesn't bother where Sita has gone, and he just took her back. I'm not like Rama. I won't take you back." And this narrated to Rama. He said, "This is what people are saying. They are finding fault with you for having accepted Sita." He said, "Raja, the king must live a faultless life. Nobody should be able to point a finger at the king." So next day he asks Lakshman, "Take this Sita and abandon her in the forest." Sita, who had proved her innocence by entering fire. This is not an easy life that he had. Parshuram, his own mother was beheaded, and Parshuram had to see all this. So what I would like to temper is, we have a kind of feeling that avatars is all come here for merrymaking and celebrations. Avatar comes here for this purpose. What we have forgotten is this, and we only remember his various leelas. This is what he says. The Creator bears the law of pain and death. A retribution smites the incarnate God. His love has paved the mortal's road to heaven. He has given his life and light to balance here the dark account of mortal ignorance. It is finished, the dread mysterious sacrifice, offered by God's martyred body for the world. Gethsemane and Calvary are his lot. He carries the cross on which man's soul is nailed. His escort is the curses of the crowd. Insult and jeer are his right's acknowledgement. 2 thieves slain with him mock his mighty death. He has trod the bleeding brow the Saviour's way. He who has found his identity with God. He who has found his identity with God pays with the body's death his soul's vast light. His knowledge immortal triumphs by his death. Well, there is much more about this, but as I said, my only purpose was to give you some flavor of beautiful lines here. Pain is the signature of the ignorance, attesting the secret God denied by life. Pain is the signature of the ignorance, attesting the secret God denied by life. Until life finds him, pain can never end. Well, finally, I would like to conclude by just saying, human reason will never be able to understand. I won't take more than 2-3 minutes. Human reason will never be able to understand in rational terms how and why pain and suffering arose in this world. Because to understand this, you need a consciousness which is somewhere near the infiniteness of God's consciousness. Because you are asking, why did that infinite consciousness choose to come down here into ignorance and matter and develop here into ignorance and matter? That is the question we are asking. But ours is a finite consciousness. And the finite consciousness, it's like an ant's consciousness trying to understand human movements. Can we ever do that? If there is a God, if there is a creator, his consciousness comprehends at least 15 billion years that have already gone by, and he must be thinking of the next 10-15 billion years the scientists have given to mankind. So 30 billion years. That's the plan of this world. And whatever he does keeping in mind this entire span of 30 billion years. How many human beings can even think of 30 billion years? So why did God choose? This is ultimately what Sri Aurobindo says. God chose to manifest in matter. And it is through matter that he is growing up. Finally, all that you can say, because ultimately the limitation to our understanding is our mental categories. and our language. And all philosophers ultimately have to abide by the rules of the intellectual game, and mind cannot understand the doings of the infinite consciousness. And therefore the Indian tradition is to say this creation is Leela, is a God's sport. In one sense it is like saying God doesn't hope to gain anything by it. When people sing in the bathroom, what do they hope to gain by it? It is just an overflow of their creative energies. It's not because they want to show how well they sing. Similarly, this is a creative joy of God which is manifesting here. If it is a creative joy, why is it full of pain and suffering? This is the question we are asking. And some philosophers have said, suppose you are a very good sportsman and you are playing a match, tennis match. Now, you generally start with love all, right? Let's say badminton is something I acquainted better. It's a game of 15 points, and 15 you win. Whoever wins the 15 points first becomes the winner. Suppose you start, a good player wants to give a handicap to the opponent. So he says, instead of saying love all, we will start with love 10. I give you 10 points, I start with love. That means by the time you make 5 points, I will make 15 points. Okay. Now, if you are a real sportsman, if you are really a master of this game, you should enjoy this challenge instead of saying love all. Now God is doing much better. He is saying love 14. And not only love 14, he has given the other chap the chance to serve. So it is 14 love against God. And he is saying before he can make 1 point, I will make 15 points. So what he has done, he has chosen to manifest himself in terms of what looks exactly like his opponent. Spirit and matter. Matter seems to be exactly the opposite of matter. He says, I will manifest myself in matter, and through matter I will grow and manifest my full glory here in material existence. And God is playing this game. This is what the Indian philosophy ultimately says. This is a Leela, this is a game. And unless you have become God, you will not understand God. There is no way of knowing God short of becoming God yourself. Only when you have done that, you will be able to answer why God chose suffering, ignorance and evil as a path for his growth, not until then. I think we'll move on from this next time to the next cantos, which is now, we have finished Canto 6, we are now entering Canto 7, which is Savitri's own view.